All right, guys, I got 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. So we have full attendance. Awesome. Thank you everyone for being here. Rick, thank you for coming. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes from our March meeting? I know it's been a while back. Entertain a motion to or any changes that need to be made.
Motion to accept. Second.
All right. All in favor? Aye. All right, well, that being done, we'll move on to our first discussion point, the unifying of the zoning codes. Rick, I'll let you take it from there.
If you had a chance to look through the ordinance, when I first started looking into, I chose the county ordinance or resolution, zoning resolution as a basis for adopting a unified document, because the charter for the county, the metropolitan language, everything that created metro part of Trumbull County, Reeves County, it focuses on that. So I left that as the base document, and I went through the two ordinances on side by side screens, and just went down the line, pulling from one to drop into the other where there was no language to match, or there was a difference in language. Very often they're the same. And we were talking earlier that if you read through it, the same hand had to have developed both ordinances. There are too many similarities for it to be that close together. I mean, a lot of them are based on the old boilerplate, the old model ordinances, but through the years they've been amended. And this one is not like the old model ordinance. It's too elegant, I guess is a good way to say it. But I tried to make distinctions where there need to be and let you see what we're talking about. A lot of things don't really matter. They can just be blended. But when it's talking about agricultural use in the county, the city goes on to say, nor shall commercial feedlots be so considered. That language doesn't show up in the county ordinance, so we've got to decide how strict or how much of that language we want to introduce. And definitions have a lot to do with what we do as a planning commission. You solve a lot of questions, a lot of issues just by simply going back and reading the definition that's adopted in the ordinance. A junkyard has a different definition in the county and in the city. Do they need to be? They need to be different. There were a couple that I wanted to point out. Like, okay, daycare center and daycare home are defined, and I can't remember reading through the ordinances whether there is a process for approving a home-based daycare center or daycare home that turns on the number of children that are involved. And the same thing with a handicapped group home. The state says if you have a residential district in your zoning ordinance, you treat handicapped group homes as you do a residential home, a single family residential home. So if there's another procedure for a handicapped group home in here, that needs to come out, because it's just gumming up the works. You can't win if you get in front of that through the process. So it's easier just to take it out and not even have it in there. It's okay to recognize it in the definitions, but a process that runs it through, say, the appeals board to approve a group home that has to be approved anyway, doesn't serve a purpose. It's already there. It's already in sync. And there are other issues like that that don't need to be spelled out or dragged through a process that doesn't gain anything. It just tends to make more people angry than it solves problems.
Do you need to have a specific place to have those listed in?
You know, if it meets the test of a mentally handicapped group home, it can go wherever a single family residence can go.
So it's just part of the exception.
Yes.
section of that?
Well, it's in the state statute, and I copied it in here, there's a copy of the state law that goes in here. If you look on the copy that I sent out, Article 2, page 6, it talks about group home for physically and mentally handicapped, major and minor. I'm kind of fuzzy on the difference there. There's not a distinction that I can remember in the state code. But the statute says, it's the purpose of this part, remove any zoning obstacles which prevent persons with a disability from living in normal residential surroundings. So the basis of the law is to enforce that exemption. And anything that gets in the way of that, in the way of zoning, is being struck down. But it's black letter. Still on definitions, landscaping, landholder, lot corner. Typically, I try to keep the definitions as simple as possible. The county says a lot, a corner lot is a lot on which at least 2 adjoining sides abut their full lengths on the street. And the city goes on to say, the city ordinance goes on to say, provided that the interior angle at the intersection of 2 such sides is less than 135 degrees. That's a little bit complicated. I think it's easier just to leave it at 2 sides on the street, regardless of the angle. There's a separate definition for many storage facilities from the city ordinance that's dropped in. Parking space. That we call that. The county says an off-street parking space for parking one motor vehicle and having an area of not less than 200 square feet. The county says 162 square feet. I mean, the city says 162 square feet. Why difference? Why
Get rid of the contradiction in terms there.
Yeah. Why do they need to be different? I can understand having a smaller space for compact cars if someone wants to do that, and we might want to make a provision for that. But to have 2 different sizes doesn't make sense. It needs to be one size.
So are we going to be working through the definitions
I'm
of
just-
things that or are you just picking out ones that?
I'm just going through, this is just a brainstorming session. I'm just going through trying to pick out the differences or point out the differences and things that we want to discuss or finalize, and things that I need some guidance on. There's a definition of structure in the city's ordinance that doesn't appear in the county's ordinance. It needs to be there. And then when we get into the body of the ordinance, the general provisions that apply to all districts, there's a difference in one principal building on a residential lot. That needs to be, I guess, discussed or decided on. Again, lot must abut on a public street, rear yard abutting a public street. And I'm just trying to run through things that stuck out at me. These all came from the city that highlighted in green, came from the city's ordinance. Things like buffer strips. They're
Rick, if I might slow you down, start backing up onto that, that section 3.020, where you had them highlighted in green, in the city, where it says only one principal building on any residential lot.
Mhm.
Is that referring to, when it says any residential, is that any residential zoning?
in the green, any residential is on the lot, yes.
So even in R3, you can only have one.
Principal building and accessory structures shall not apply to group housing developments.
Okay.
And
What I
mobile
was
home
discussing with you earlier about the
Yeah.
tiny, that would be a group.
Now, I know with like
Well,
8,
it depends if they're cutting it up into individual lots. If they have an individual lot that makes the size for the district, then if they only have one principal structure on that lot, that's what it's talking about.
So if they keep their lot as a 5 acre and they were to put multiple structures on there for single family living.
It would have to be a group housing development. Who agree or abide by that definition.
just to bring everyone else into the conversation, the idea of a tiny home subdivision has been brought before the planning commission by an individual who has 5 acres on Halltown. And they're trying to figure out how it fits in our regulations. We had it brought up by the former mayor of putting tiny homes in our zoning. We decided at that point, there was no reason to. We already had mobile home park zonings. We already had residential zonings. So if it was a stick built, we had regulations. It didn't matter the size of the dwelling. So now what we're trying to figure out, now that that's been brought forward, we're trying to figure out how everything fits in with our current zoning. So seeing that, and I had seen that before, and I was just wanting to kind of pick your brain there on how that would apply.
It's typical to have a restriction of one principal building on a lot, especially in residential settings. And the exemption for group housing developments is common too. I'm sorry, I cut you off and didn't mean to.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just gonna say, I know with A1, if they have greenbelt exemption as in 15 acres, they're allowed to have more than one living structure on the property if it's just for a immediate family.
If they're under agricultural exemption,
Yes, sir.
that overrides the zoning provisions. It has to be active, it has to be
Mhm.
qualified as a farm or farm, what was it called? Not a farming operation. It's not agricultural, there's a term for it that has to qualify for $1,500 a year and
It's
several things.
the greenbelt.
They just have to do with dividing the property. If I remember right, they get a tax break if they go under green belt and it's at least 15 acres.
Mhm. Just what I was told, so.
It meets the zoning, it would go right on. Apparently, it was something that was brought up, that have been, what, 4 years ago?
Well, it's first I heard.
I heard
Steve.
When the,
I was somewhere about halfway through
so,
his administration, he started talking about that.
yeah, so there were actually people coming and talking to him, wanting to do it on other properties.
Sam
was spearheading it.
Yeah.
But
All right, great.
Sorry.
It's okay. I don't know.
There are physical differences in the ordinance too. If you look at 3.050 obstruction division at a street intersection prohibited. It says 2.5 feet and 10 feet in the county, but it says 3.5 and 10 feet in the city. And what that's trying to do is to give you a clear line of sight when you pull up in a car. And the 2.5 or 3.5 is supposed to be from a seated position in a passenger car. So typically, what I've seen is 2.5. 3.5 is a little bit high for some cars, I think. So I would go with the 2.5 and keep it at that, even though 3.5 has been in the city's ordinance for a long time. I think it makes more sense to have it at a lower level there. And really, the only thing that gets in the way of usually is mailboxes and entrance signs.
The sign should be so far set back that it shouldn't interfere with that intersection.
Should. And there's the triangle there, 90 feet in the city and 75 in the county, and that's a little bit small. It needs to be larger. So that's what I'm looking for, is just guidance on things like that. Do you want me to move the things from the city into the county's ordinance that belong and make sense? Or do you want me to make suggestions on things like that site triangle at an intersection that really ought to be 100 feet instead of 75 in the county? That kind of thing. That's what I need help with. Is how do you want me to proceed?
I would like a suggestion,
Okay,
because you know way more about this than I do. So I would love to hear your suggestion.
Like I told David, it's time in the barrel.
So the other discussion I'd like to have is, he's pointing these out, so you've got, of course, you always have more restrictions in the urban than you would in the rural areas. So as we're unifying this, do we just adopt the less restrictive, or do we adopt the more restrictive throughout the county?
Or do we make exceptions for urban services?
And see, that's kind of where.
It's all gonna be on one document, but I think
Exactly.
there are some things that would make more sense in the city versus county. I know we're metro, but I think there,
No, you're right.
you know,
because
there
you're-
may be some,
Your density is more in the urban.
not wrong.
It's just how we go about that in structuring this document. And that's what I've been trying to get as much input on as I can. You're talking with Jim Carmen, his suggestion was keeping some of our zoning when we get to that part of it. Keeping the zoning, keep it all continuous instead of having two C1s.
Absolutely.
Doing it that way and still being able to keep those, so you're not changing your zoning, you're just relabeling it an easier way to.
To
follow.
understand,
Yeah.
yes.
Now, like he was talking about, the difference between 75 and 100.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can understand for safety wise and building and how they
mhm,
have it. I would think city and county both be 100.
yeah,
Because sometime or another, you may have people turning out, traffic's much heavier, it'd just be safer than having 75, but it'd be better having 100.
Mhm.
So, whatever we were talking about there, but
so it doesn't look like we're able to give you a set guideline on making these mergers, we're just gonna have to hit them one at a time. So I have to bring them here, we'll have our say on it, or you go to planning, let them have their say on it.
Probably more efficient to do it a section at a time.
That's what I was thinking.
yeah.
Just kind of making a list of, all right, so how do you want this interpreted?
Yeah.
And just let it walk through.
Maybe it should be in the county.
Because,
Should be
And part of that should be until the rest of the catches up
yeah,
and do it all at one time as a final combined honest
yeah,
metric.
because we can be walking these through here and walking them through planning while you're moving on to the different zoning areas.
Sure.
And we can have all that completed for you and be able to put back and present it for the document. I think that's gonna be the easier way of doing that. Because there's so much variation in in each one of them that you're showing.
Mhm.
Really doesn't seem like we can give an overall. But some of the stuff, yeah, okay, just go with the more constrained, and on others, we need to change it completely.
And there will be a term at the end of the document that says whenever there's a conflict, the more stringent shall apply.
And that's what it states already.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's a standing already in what we have.
But in case there's something in there that's unintended.
And it already states that, if there's a conflict between the Hartsville and the Troutdale, the more restrictive is already in effect. So that's why I was asking, do we just go ahead and on all the more restrictive and just, that is what we do?
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all were aware of that. That language is already existing in our zoning. That if there's a conflict between the county and the city, the more restrictive ordinance prevails. So we're not changing anything that's already been passed, we're just making it so.
Way, I mean, to clear up both of them, I'd be the best. Go with which one ever is strict, go strict, that'd be the one to adopt. I mean, that's my opinion.
I think it would be easier too for the constituents to understand, and be
Yeah,
able to relate
it
to,
would.
because a lot of discussion over the phone when people call the office, it's like, okay, now where do you live? Are you in the county? Are you in the, in the city and things of that?
Just these three.
Bingo,
Mhm.
exactly. Keep
So-
it simple.
I think that really does answer that question. Then. So I guess we can be kind of moving in that direction. So when you run into two conflicts there, the more restrictive is what we do with it.
Okay, unless like the site triangle, another value that
Yes.
Right.
serves the purpose better.
And we can, like, we just do that
Sure.
line by line on those. I know when this was originally brought before the executive committee and the full commission, you know, that question was brought up, so are y'all gonna be changing a bunch of stuff? And I told everyone that was not the purpose. We're
Exactly.
not trying to rewrite ordinances here. We're just trying to logically combine them to make and clean up. Just irregularities that we run across.
Right. Not-
And to
not-
avoid that confusion, whatever we do change, I think the document that's presented to the full commission needs to have the old and the new language on it.
Just like, it'll look something like this.
Okay, perfect, perfect,
So that they can see what we did.
exactly.
One
If they read.
one good example of my, I guess, problem in trying to consolidate accessory use regulations, and I don't need an answer tonight, but think about it and let me know later on if there is an answer that you like. The use of land, buildings, other structures, this is the counties, other structures permitted in each of the districts established by this resolution or designated by listing principal uses. In addition to such principal uses, accessory uses such as garages and small outbuildings in residential areas, etc., which are customarily incidental to the permitted principal use, are also permitted in each district. See definition of accessory use. So far, so good. Each accessory use shall be customarily incidental to the principal use established on the same lot, be subordinate to and serve such principal use, be subordinate in area, intent, and purpose to such principal use, contribute to the comfort, convenience, and or necessity of users of such principal use. The city goes on to say, the city's ordinance goes on to say, not use trailers, vans, mobile homes, buses, truck bodies, or automobiles for storage. So a decision needs to be made.
I know.
Do you also continue that into the new ordinance?
Well, I mean, and then anyone using a semi-trailer as storage now will be grandfathered.
Right.
Because I know that happens on several different properties.
Right.
Um,
Like I said, don't have to decide tonight, but
yeah,
that's a biggie.
that's a biggie.
Would that carry over to sea containers?
Yeah. If they still had, you know, if they still had a chassis, or if they were just. I
And
don't know, if
that
it's
can
just-
be expanded. That language can be expanded to include pods and
Mhm.
things like that as well.
Yeah, sea containers are getting really popular because you can buy us in surplus, they're inexpensive and they're, you know, they're virtually indestructible.
Exactly. I ate at a restaurant in Gulf Shores on occasion that's made up of storage containers, the Gulf.
You're making houses out of it, people live in it.
They're good food, yeah.
Can't tear it up.
And pretty good against the bullet too.
And there are some differences in things like buffer strips. If you read through the ordinances, and I tried to make it comparative by including the different provisions from the cities in the document. And I just went ahead and dropped all of general provisions, Article 3 in for backup, just so that you see what is there, and you got it in print, but in this electronic version, you got it in front of you if you want to look at that as well. Supplementary provisions, again, it repeats the square footage for the parking space. Churches. Shouldn't be a difference in churches in the county and the city.
Absolutely not.
The county says any auditorium, church, stadium, or other place of public assembly, not less than one parking space for each 5 seats. The city says 1 space for each 4 seats.
Well, that should be the same. Yeah.
Don't know why, but it's in there.
Well, I think that would be different.
Two different people are.
Two
It was
different
written
times.
at 2 different times.
Yeah.
That's the only I can think of.
Cars are smaller than coming.
Perfect.
So just as a general rule. In those instances where there are differences in parking requirements. Should I go with the more stringent, the one that causes the most parking spaces to be developed, because that's what this is calling for. In the church, in the county, it's one space per 5 seats. In the city, it's one space per 4 seats. So you're gonna have 20% more parking in the county. And that's a cost. It could be a school, church stadium, or other place of public assembly, auditorium. So if the architect is designing the school, is looking at this and knows his stuff, he's gonna design it to whichever is called for.
Yeah.
Dental clinic. County says you don't have a lot of dental clinics in the county, I'm guessing. But if it is, it says it's 3 spaces per doctor, and the city, it says 4 spaces per doctor. So I need help.
Yeah, you do. And-
What-
This is
What
just a
is the
general,
normal,
that is gonna take some digging. I'm guessing that these came from some version of the ITE parking standard. And those haven't changed a lot, so I don't know how they got mixed up, and whether, when they were plugging them in, somebody said, oh, we won't have a lot of that in the county, don't make them build as many parking spaces or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just thought it was odd that there would be a difference in the two. Not all are different, shopping centers the same, but those are.
So what is it for a shopping center?
For 1,000 square feet.
Yeah.
But that's ITE stuff, that's a parking standard, and they don't get revised that often. It's common for a parking standard to stay around for 20 years.
Be the most restricted.
In the dental clinic, the city, 4 spaces per doctor.
but
3 at the
if the
city.
shopping center is based on square footage, why can't all the rest of them be based on square footage inside of the building?
It's what the principal use is, how is the general measurement of the use of the space, like an auditorium is seats.
Mhm.
Because you don't know how the seats are gonna be arranged in an auditorium, so they use that, the fire marshal uses that as a guide as well.
And how many seats determines kind of how many cars that would be at the facility? I would lean more towards doing the one parking spot per 5, as is close to the 5 per 1,000 on the stores. You kind of get some consistency, I guess, in my mind. Does anyone else?
I agree with that, I think. Yes.
So a lower standard.
Yes.
So are we saying? What are we saying then? 4 spaces?
Well, no, I mean, if we did 5, that does lower the standard. If you do 1 parking spot for 5. That's less parking spaces than what the city was 1 parking spot for 4 seats.
I think the lesser restrictions will be more favorably received.
I do too. At the same time, I'm still falling back on the statement of the more restrictive will be enforced, because that is a conflict. And like I said, I'm not wanting this to be something where we're changing ordinances. I'm just wanting to legally combine the 2. So at that point, we would have to do the more restrictive, would we not?
I mean, churches aside, most of these uses are gonna be in the city anyway.
Yeah. Which are already abiding by the 4 seats for their parking spot.
And I would really like to change the one for other, it reads the same as both. It's
Dollar store.
Mhm.
At 231, what's the parking there?
It would be based on their square footage.
retail sales. It's, if it's in the county, it's a space for 200 square feet of building.
Not
This,
really their square footage, I don't.
The Dollar Tree. She said the other night,
They have to get a variance.
because it was 3 or 4 parking spots short.
It's fine.
Where is it going to
Time, minute mark. There, between that, and that
be? More time.
water tank. You'll see. I got it. I showed it to you.
make a note to myself. There's one, it's for other, if it's not a use defined. For buildings and uses not listed, the off-street parking requirements shall be determined by the board of zoning appeals. That's too open-ended, that don't need to be there. That's a trip that doesn't need to happen. There needs to be a general catch-all requirement for parking there.
What'd you say again?
Says for other uses not listed for parking, for buildings and uses not listed, the off-street parking requirement shall be determined by the board of zoning appeals.
So what would you suggest being for other?
Like the shopping center, come up with a standard for, 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet or something like that, just as,
Just in general.
yeah, keep it general, keep it light. That's not a heavy parking requirement.
And then if they don't like that, then they can go to the BCA for.
I think that makes perfect sense.
The city allows combination of required parking spaces. I don't know whether you have that much friction in the county with, say, a church parking lot being beside a business, maybe the paint store or that area, some places like that I can think of. The city says you can combine those for parking lots that are not used during business hours, like churches. You can come up with an agreement and share those parking spaces. That's probably a good thing to have in the counties as well.
Yeah, I know that, so like over here where, the church there by the creek,
Creek Bank.
no,
Cornerstone.
yeah, the church there, they're in like a strip mall there,
Journey.
Journey,
Yeah, excuse me.
and their parking lot is shared with Drowsdale Comfort, and it's all kind of that all.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I can see,
What about here in town? Where there just ain't a lot of parking.
yeah,
This is combined.
Yeah, it's in there.
it's allowing them to
It's in there.
do that. And so Journey Church can use
Yeah,
Trousdale Comfort, because Trousdale Comfort wouldn't be open on a Sunday.
Yeah.
So they can use that parking area as
They can count that
their
as
fault,
theirs.
yeah, and then vice versa.
Yeah.
Also, that's why the county's looking at getting some more parking areas in the downtown area.
we used it a couple Sundays ago, and I parked at Daryl's.
Yeah. I think when the yellow building that's attached to the bridge, when it's torn down and GDOT comes in and fix, it's gonna be a parking lot there.
It's gonna be a while.
No, it's gonna be a lot.
It's gonna be a parking lot there.
Wow.
It's gonna be a while too.
Yeah.
I don't know what, it's like, was it because of the asbestos?
It's gonna, yeah, the whole
It's
the
gotta be-
premise is gonna be completely abated.
What?
It's gotta be abated before they can tear it down.
Slip to catch fire. I didn't say that.
Never wish that on you.
And there's some language in here that makes my head hurt when I read it. The city says that for off-street loading and unloading, the spaces shall be suitably paved. Who
Which one
determines,
we do?
who determines suitable?
You're paid, but it's not paid.
Suitably paved. I flagged that, one. That needs some.
That does make your head hurt.
Yeah, yeah, because you're gonna argue that.
It should just say paved.
Yeah,
Instead of
exactly.
suitably, it should just say paved.
Temporary use regulations, the city adds limited duration goods and merchandise sales as temporary use. It adds real estate sales office, seasonal farm and farm produce, which I would have thought would have been in the counties, but it's in the cities.
Well, because you have the city, you have setting up little stands, like, beside.
Right,
Yeah,
but I would have thought it would have been in the county, if it doesn't show up there. Temporary manufacture of road materials. That's in the cities, not in the counties.
Excuse me?
Yeah,
It's kind of interesting.
well, that's like the meat pack. The reason that Anderson's is in the city's industrial parks and not out at Powercom is because you can't put a meat packing plant in the county according to zoning. You can only do it in the city, in the urban. It's actually permitted in the county specifically.
According to our ordinances.
And that was set forth in one
Hardly like.
I've been sure. I have no idea. I don't know when it was enacted. I was looking through that. That was one of the reasons he couldn't.
Cheap prices.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, but why? You would want it in the county, not. But
I mean, I don't have a problem with it.
no, I haven't heard anyone since he actually got up and going. No one's complained that I'm aware of. I'm just saying, as an example, that's another situation where you would kind of want that stuff out in the county. Where
I
it's
think it
not
should be
around.
allowed either way.
Yeah,
I mean,
but to completely block it from one. Just doesn't make any sense. So that's kind of what led me down this road of wanting to kind of clean some of these things up. When I started running across that sort of stuff.
this is temporary manufacturer of road materials. Temporary, what does that mean? Temporary. I mean,
You would assume that it means the life of the project. But if it's not defined, it may not mean that.
You could have a temporary quarry. Where you're only
Okay,
getting out.
it goes back to temporary use permit, so it'll be controlled there for however long that the permit is good.
But a rock crusher anyway, on temporary.
I mean, that being said, when they built the bridge out here, I'm sure that they're going to be taking advantage of that situation. To be able to do stuff close to the site, try to use as much on-site material as possible.
I got a whole deal for
Yeah.
it. Sure. I'd be more than happy to sell gloves.
David, you may be able to help me with this one. This letter, I dealt with one that I can remember when I worked here. Customary incidental home occupations, minor home occupation and major home occupation. Do you remember why that came about? Why there's a minor and a major?
But I know, I remember we talked about it, but it was a long time ago. I don't remember why.
It sidesteps the zoning process when it's in there the way it is written. If you can do a major home occupation that allows products or goods produced, fabricated from raw materials or items repaired on the premises as a result of a home occupation.
And then with the processes now, currently how we handle major and minor home occupations.
We had, what was somebody. Was it down 230?
We had one across the river when I was here,
But I can't remember what
back toward Providence, somewhere. I don't remember the exact.
they were doing, something out there that was.
Yeah, and it came through as this and got approved as that. But it concerns me that something is in there that allows that much latitude through the zoning ordinance that goes to the planning commission. Home occupations, gainful occupation profession conducted entirely within principal dwelling unit or approved accessory building by members of the household. The use of the dwelling or approved accessory building for the home occupation shall be clearly incidental and subordinate. This section classifies all home occupations as minor, and major home occupations and subject to the respective limitations prescribed. All other uses that are not considered under one of these classifications is prohibited under these regulations. And Minor is what you'd expect in a home as
It's a secondary, yeah.
as a traditional accessory home occupation. Minor home occupation shall include offices for accountants, architects, artists, engineers, and the like. Those kinds of piano lessons, maybe someone doing a print shop that's got a silk screen room set up in their house or something like that, that doesn't have to have any outside machinery or changes to the building, that kind of stuff.
We had a couple over 231. What of them gonna be, during the Sunday, it was gonna be a church. And then after church, it was gonna be a restaurant.
Remember them coming in, yeah.
And then, close to that area was a guy that was working on the bills.
Yeah.
But they're off on the other side of the road, back behind the old bar, where the old bar is, but back in there.
You're talking about down in Bartholomew?
Yeah, when you go towards 11 there.
Yeah.
Where it's back in there, and then the other one was on across the road. In that area. Like the church.
Major home occupations shall include barber and beauty shops, teaching of music and dance. Okay, so far, small engine appliance repair, upholstery shops, real estate offices, welding shops, woodworking shops, manufacturing or processing of garments and other similar uses. Manufacturing or processing, that's not a home occupation. Several of those are not home occupations, not like teaching piano lessons.
Yeah.
No, if somebody had a bakery at their house. That would be,
A major occupation.
Maybe, but it's not listed. You can do a welding shop, but not a bakery.
I have a bakery at my house.
I'm talking about a big bakery. This is manufacturing process. Is yours big? I'll be quiet.
In my garage.
But I mean, the question is, do you want to retain that language? Do you want that to stay in here as a part of the zoning ordinance? I know we're not supposed to change things.
That would have to be something that we would have to bring out
Okay.
as an item. And, because that would have to go and everyone would have to see that and have their input on how they want to proceed.
That's fine. It concerns me that it's in here. It concerned me when I was here years ago. It still does.
Because it's,
Tell me why it concerns you.
Because it allows someone to have a commercial use as a home occupation. It goes around the zoning process. I mean, typically you would expect a welding shop to be in a commercial or industrial area and be zoned that way. Typically, you would expect a woodworking shop to be in a commercial or industrial area and be zoned that way.
depending on the scope, size of the.
I mean,
It doesn't limit it.
Yeah, and that's the point.
There's a lot of people I know too, welding,
Mhm.
and now the
Whole
garage.
barn in the
and
back.
woodworking and cabinet stuff out of there, a shop at the farm,
Yeah,
you know?
the barn around the garage.
So.
I don't see a problem with that.
Well, and where the rub is here is all right, so we have that, so you can have a major occupation at a residential or agricultural lot in that zone. But when you're in a commercial zoning, you can't have a residential with your commercial. If you're in C2, you can't live where your business is.
I don't think it'd be okay to change that.
So you can go the other way. You can be residential and have a business, but on a commercial lot, you can't have a business and live there. You know, the example was, the gentleman who owns the old Bubba's Market kept wanting to have a double wide put behind the store on his same lot. You can't do that. It's commercial, it's C2. You can't have residential. C1 in the urban, you can live, you can have mixed use. You can have a residence above your commercial building. But out in the county and in other parts of the urban, you can't do that. But if you say, well, it's my resident and I'm major occupation, you're kind of sidestepping that other process. So I understand the conflict there, how to resolve it, I'm not 100% sure.
A typical accessory home occupation doesn't alert anyone to the fact there's another occupation, home occupation there. It's not supposed to be advertised, it doesn't increase traffic, it doesn't require parking. It's a home occupation, it's taking up a corner bedroom as a accountant's office. Or Aunt Sue is teaching piano lessons in the afternoon after school, that kind of thing. So you may have little Johnny dropped off 2 or 3 times during the week, but it's not a,
But you're not having 6 cars parked in your front yard.
and you're not employing people outside residents, that kind of thing.
I believe we had a guy here on River Street that had a home. And his, the company shipped guns to him, and then he got them to the Everhoo.
He was a middleman.
He was
He had
middleman,
FFL and he was doing transfers.
yeah. And it was right up here on,
Yeah.
on the left somewhere.
And I don't see an issue with
Yeah,
Leslie, even with your situation, most of what yours is, it's either 1 or 2 people at a time coming and picking up. And then most of the time, you're using your facility to cater away from your house.
Absolutely, I mean, I have
And-
people picking up every day, but I don't wanna discourage that.
Exactly,
We don't,
because that's how
not
business.
just talking my own personal, but everybody else,
But that's
anybody
how
else.
business
that's involved in it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I see Rick's point.
This is supposed to be a forward-looking document.
Yeah.
And don't satisfy yourself with what is today or what has been in the past. I mean, the decisions that you make here are good for 50 to 100 years. And we don't know all the unintended consequences. And if I move into an area that's zoned residential,
Yeah.
I have an expectation of what is going to go on around it.
Yes. But they're not moving next to a fabrication.
It's not an overt contract, but because it's only, I have an expectation of what's going on around me, what's expected to move in next door. I shouldn't have to worry about a welding shop coming in next door,
I get it.
you know, so just throwing it out there. Don't need an answer.
No, what we do need though, Rick, is for you to separate that out and any like that you run across. And let us address those each
Okay.
one. We'll take it,
Sure.
I'll take it to planning
Sure.
and we can get even more suggestions and thoughts on that.
Well, here's a,
Because that'll have to go before the full commission as an ordinance, as an amended ordinance.
well, this is another curveball, but it's a slow mover. You can see it. You can see it break. There's a provision 4070 in the Hartsville ordinance for cluster residential development. Does anyone know if there's ever been a cluster subdivision developed? under
That's
these
what they
conditions?
brought forward. That's what they were discussing for the time. That's what they're
Cluster.
going to do. Yes, sir.
Is that the only time that you can think of?
Yes.
Yes.
See, that's a good reason to take it out. It doesn't belong in the zoning ordinance #1. It belongs in the subdivision regulations. But if it's never been used, it seems to me like it could be done away with and no harm, no foul. I'll put that in.
because it's in the discussion stage right now.
Are they using that section to justify, to make it okay for them to do this development? And so if we take that out, it makes it not okay for them to do this development?
100%.
Well, that depends. Right now, they're just discussing it. They've brought nothing forward. So if we were to change it next month before they brought something forward, yes, now they have to abide by any changes. As it sits, until it's changed, that yes, they can still use it.
And you said it didn't belong in there at all. So if we take it out and altogether, that means they can't do that development.
No, it just changes the process. And instead of it being a zoning, it goes into the subdivision, which
Okay.
is regulated through the planning commission.
Mhm.
So it doesn't take that option of that type of project away. It just changes who has the oversight and where it's.
Understand, I'm not for or against that project.
Yeah, no, this is a discussion.
Project, okay, I'm just trying to figure out
And-
the ramifications for the changes we're making.
And for the fact of the video, this is discussion. So anything that's been brought up, properties or projects or whatnot, are purely for examples for what we're discussing.
And that only shows up in the county's version.
Yes.
It's not in the city's. 4070 was.
I know there was a project that was brought up for doing like a gated community for elderly. And that had been looked at, but because he was in the city limits, it didn't qualify. So-
Over 55.
Yeah.
Can't be done the city.
Well, not under the cluster, because the cluster only applies, which doesn't really make any sense. That cluster section applies in the county, but you would want sewer to do that cluster. So it's even set up to where it's not beneficial. You would have to have a perked area that would support multiple dwellings. And most of Hartsville will do good to support a 4-bedroom house. So it doesn't even fit where it's at in the zone. It's a complete just dropped in the middle of nowhere, and I have no idea why or how it got there. It predates any time I've been on the planning, so that's at least 6 years, 7 years back. I just ran across it by accident, just looking through, trying to find something.
I mean, Mount Juliet, I got a,
My mom's having to live in Gallatin
I got
now.
a cousin that's on Mount Juliet, she loves.
Looking at the sign provisions, do you want me to do the same thing with signs that we talked about with parking? And, you know, allow larger signs if one jurisdiction has a difference? That kind of question.
Honestly, when it comes to the signs, what's been going on currently anyway is an entity comes in, they have a standard sign size, and that's what size their sign is. And so they come in, they go to the BZA, and the BZA says, oh, we really want your business, so here's a variance.
Okay.
And they're rarely enforced anymore. That needs to be corrected, and I'm hoping with the new BZA, that will start being corrected, and holding some standards there. So yeah, I guess
Structure.
the more restricted between the two is what we would need to go with.
Okay. Okay. There's not that many differences, but there are.
Yeah.
Into the Midway. Mobile home parks, do you have proposals for mobile home parks?
Well, we are looking at that right now for the tiny home. You know, of how that works. We do have a mobile home park in Charleston County, and I think that's why it was put in place, because at the time of that mobile home park, it is in the county.
Bradley Burke,
Yeah. Dalton Hollow.
be invited on Bradley Burke.
My understanding was that mobile home park was started before the regulations were put in place. They put the regulations in place because they didn't want it to expand out throughout the county. And I can understand that because,
It's really the only mobile home park in
yeah, there's another one down here by the cemetery. As you're going up to EMS there, which that is slowly disappearing. They're being drug off. I know Matthew Carmen bought 2 of the lots on Cemetery Road.
Yeah, he's putting houses on me.
Well, that's what he got approved for, but I haven't seen any construction.
Anything
down
up
there,
there,
So I don't know. They
yeah,
were-
he had approved, I remember that. That it wants to trailer back,
Yes.
they were filtered out, and they put a build up.
Is there anything else that comes to mind just right offhand that you would want to?
Oh,
Stuff that I like what I'm seeing as far as what you've done so far. This is just the first part. We haven't really gotten to the zoning side. This is just kind of cleaning up definitions and, you know, exemptions and whatnot. I'm actually really surprised to see you've gotten this far through that section.
one thing I didn't do is include or try to combine the mobile home park standards for the city into the document. They're a fair bit apart, and I don't know what direction to take there. That's the reason I ask if you see mobile home park development proposals. I don't know. I don't know if you want to just leave it with the better of the two.
Well,
If we have one that is in the city that one is abiding by, shouldn't we just keep those regulations.
Their grandfather.
And just-
But for future,
Those two grandfather.
Oh, yeah, future development.
future developments coming in, I guess you could still, I mean, we could still ratify this as a single document, and still keep the difference between the two. Just keep them 100% separated.
Big thing now is for, campers.
Yeah,
That's,
Or glamping.
huh,
Have you heard of glamping?
what's that,
That's a fancy camper.
Glamorous.
you know.
We don't do low budget, we do fancy camper.
They spend as much on
That's a
campers
big
as you do a
thing.
house.
People bring it in for campers for working these jobs or, and I'd say if this road goes through in August, they start.
Yeah.
Then you'll have a ton of people here trying to live and live.
So if the county, whichever one is more strict, I would say,
that's what the ordinance reads.
Because trying to have two under one cover is gonna drive
Yeah,
Rosalie crazy.
We need drive. I've already adopted that from where I would. If we could also look at some of the definitions, when we first started talking about combining the ordinances, one of the things that we said that kind of needed to be updated was like the building inspector, the definitions. It needs to be building official because the building official is the only one really that has the authority to sign off on flats and really to sign off on certificate of occupancies. And so we might need to change that so that there's,
but isn't that in the charter itself? In the building official versus building inspector? I think that's defined in the charter. So the charter would have to be changed before we could change this ordinance.
okay,
we'll have to, I have to go back and look at that.
Okay.
Yeah. If that is the way it is, then it's what we have to do.
yeah, because it's definitely like legal aspects of code administration and, you know, the ICC. And then we had defined prefabricated dwelling in the definition. This almost sounds like they could go and buy something off of Lowe's parking lot and put it out there and attach it to like the sewer system or the septic system and be able to live in it. And that's not allowed.
Is it not?
No, no, sir. No, because it's not been inspected. Now, modular homes are different.
They're casualty.
Prefabricated dwellings does not meet building codes. And then the definition that we have for a townhouse. It says here, means a residential structure containing 3 or more non-detached dwelling units separated by a common vertical wall. That'll get us in trouble. Here's what the definition of a townhouse is. And the building codes. They have to be individual units. They will have like a common firewall, but it has to be separate units from foundation all the way up to the roof deck. Or they will have to sprinkle the townhomes. So, and if we don't truly define that, that's gonna lead.
Out here, Melrose, when that, what they were gonna put there at one time.
Well, there are some on Hayes there. Melrose, yeah, they were gonna do the 38 townhomes. They were gonna do those there. We do have the townhomes right behind Piggly Wiggly there. I think there's 4 there. 5.
Yeah, there's.
Development, talked about last year or so. Is that
112,
They haven't
Sorry?
programmed.
they have not. I think the economy is really good.
That's right.
I think looking
Some
at
breaks,
developing
some
that
things.
property the way they wanted to, look a lot more expensive when they got into it. There's one thing I have found, that if Luke Beasley looks at a property and says you can't make money with this property, more than likely you can't make money with the property. I don't care who you are. So. There's a reason why his subdivision is where it is, and he didn't buy that property also.
And then, item I, it has condominium, means an apartment building or a townhouse. I would just take the townhouse out of there.
You already have a definition for a townhouse, you wouldn't put,
Exactly.
I wouldn't think you'd put townhouse in.
And,
another-
condominium is more commercial.
Mm.
Pardon me?
To
And those are things that are just being cleaned up, and
Mhm.
once again, all that, we're amending ordinance, so all that'll have to go before the commission. For the planning and the bills, and be voted upon. Now, it's completely understandable, it can easily be explained, you're not making any, when you are just cleaning up the language. Modernizing our zoning. I would like to think that there wouldn't be any issues with getting that done, but
go down to Article 5 there. You asked about getting to the zoning district. We can talk about that for a minute. If y'all are getting anxious to leave.
well, we still have one more thing on the agenda. I really would like to have your opinion. Inside.
I don't know, all the time. If you look at the classification of districts, the county is in bold and the districts are called out in that one paragraph. And then down below is my suggestion for how to do the city's districts and leave it intact. It's just a different way of identifying.
Maybe the HC. versus the-
Put an HR, HC, HI. And I've got it labeled as HF1 floodway districts. Now, I don't know that you need zoning districts for floodplain or floodway. And if you look at my note there, I suggest deleting this category. It doesn't stand as a zoning district. It is just an overlay for whatever zoning it happens to affect. Yeah. But I would take that out as a district. And I would also suggest in the final document, pulling out the floodplain, floodway portion of the ordinance that starts on
And maybe that be
5.080.
an appendix on the back.
Bingo, exactly right. And that way, if it changes somewhere down the road, it doesn't affect the rest of the ordinance. It just, you
You just,
pull that out and substitute the new language.
I can understand the reasoning for that. As we were talking earlier, as certain areas are being raised above grade, getting out of that floodway. Houses are being built there. Now you don't have to go back and redo a whole ordinance. You've got your appendix there and you just change it and move on. It doesn't make the future implementation of this easier.
Go down another page or two, if you would, specific district regulations under A1, use that as an example. Agricultural services are called out, crop animal raising are called out. All of these different uses are called out in each individual district. It works a lot better to have it in a matrix that shows what uses or use categories are
We actually,
in each
You
district.
have that.
we actually passed that and it is part of our new zoning.
Okay,
That actually was done as you were coming on board with this project.
okay.
So I don't know if I was able to get you that table,
I don't have
the
that.
usage table, I'll get you, I'll email you a copy of that.
And I would do the same with the bulk regulations. If you go on back to a few pages down where it talks about minimum area per dwelling, front yard setback, that kind of thing, all that can be compressed into a matrix as well.
And I think the way that we adopted that table, we adopted that table as an ordinance itself.
Right.
Which makes it harder to adjust that ordinance. You know what I'm saying? So every time that table changes. Because of another ordinance, you have to pass another ordinance to change that table. We were trying to adjust that, and I don't know if we ever really came up with a good solution.
Really?
I thought we did.
I thought it was all the same.
That way
So that
it's
every
gonna be a living, breathing document.
Right, so that, I thought we put it with the zoning to code, so that when we change the codes, it changes the table as well.
And that's what I was hoping that I just
I
can't
believe
remember.
it did.
I think that's what we did.
So every time we
Yeah.
change a code,
It automatically
It automatically
changes.
changes.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think it's a separate ordinance. I think it's part of this ordinance.
And then we just add these to them.
so then I'll get you a copy of that, and then we'll see how we fit that in. If we have to change the number on it, I don't think that we require a full vote on the, new service.
Well, if you drop it in here and incorporate it into this document.
Yeah.
It would change when it's adopted.
And I did it. I'm
Yeah.
99% sure that's how we did it.
And that,
I know
that
it was a
acts,
concern, and I
Yeah.
can't remember how it got resolved.
that acts like an appendix. It shows up as a table.
Yeah.
And you just go to that to see what use is allowed or what the front setback is in C1.
And
You don't have
that
to table
table,
through the ordinance.
the way that table is laid out, it has permitted and it has exceptions.
Yes,
So it does list both of those on that table, the way we have it in the ordinance.
But not setbacks.
No,
Just
so,
land uses.
yeah, so that would be a whole separate table we would come up with. Which I think would serve a great purpose, not having to go deep through your ordinances to find it.
makes it easier.
Just to have a table in residential, here's what your setbacks, are,
Exactly.
commercial, industrial.
Made that for myself when I do building permits.
Makes it easier. It does.
The trick is going to be, the setbacks for the city does not meet the setbacks for the county, so. Marrying those up or just making that, like you said, a matrix. If you're urban, then here's your setbacks. If
Well,
you're county, here's
The
your
way
setbacks.
he's proposing doing the combining on the zoning, and doing the county versus, so you have the H versus, HR one versus a TR one.
Mhm.
And so you would have your, so in HR one, you
Sure.
have setbacks, and TR one, you have different setbacks.
Mhm.
But you'd still have your same zoning, you can still do the same matrix, so I think that's, I think that accomplishes exactly what we're trying to do
Okay.
in doing it that way. And you're not having to go back and create a C3, or, create something different, all you're doing
No,
is.
exactly. The difference would be that once it's in the matrix, it doesn't have to stay in the body of the district, it just, it refers to that table and
So
operates that way.
I guess what would you want us to try to get the table created first? And then you would you would add it in once it's in the ordinance, or would you put it in?
You know, it'll all be some part of the same document. I
Okay,
mean, it'll show up when you see the final version. It'll have say the setbacks will be scrubbed out of the individual districts, and it'll just refer to table 1 or table 2.
okay,
And then that table will have all the setbacks, or another table will have all the uses.
okay.
The districts themselves get to be kind of slim. There's not a lot left
Yeah.
to refer back to them for at that point. But it should all go in together and be adopted as one final document.
Okay. Well, I don't know about the rest of the subcommittee, but I'm really excited and impressed by how much you've accomplished in a short amount of time. I had expectations of this, at least this much, taking on into at least into the fall. So. Thank you, because at the rate you're going, I'm guessing by the end of the year, we should have something to present to the full commission, depending on getting
I would hope so.
any discussion that gets kind of bogged down, but.
I would hope so.
So I want to thank you for what you've done so far. Is there any other comments or questions on the zoning?
So at the next meeting, you'll come back and we'll discuss the other changes, the specific things in different sections that you need guidance on, or
You're
like,
talking about the zoning districts.
no, just all the stuff that you had highlighted in this document already that we didn't necessarily give you guidance on.
The things that need to come out line by line.
Yeah.
For discussion. I mean, if next month's too soon because of other.
Oh, I don't think that's necessarily next month, that's fine, if it's a couple months or whatever, I just,
I'm just running through my, running through my head, trying to come up with a game plan. Most of what you saw highlighted is from the city's ordinance merged in with this document. So if my guidance is to go with the more strict of the two.
Yeah.
That simplifies it greatly, and all we would need to talk about from that point forward would be things like, do we leave cluster development in there, that kind of thing. I mean, those are major.
So those are the things that I think we're asking to bring back line item.
Okay.
Is the cluster, the
Oh, yeah.
occupations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I can take that to planning and we have a larger body, get the NRC's input on it, and so that it's completely, fleshed out and discussed, so that when we bring it back here, it's not just us.
Exactly. Do we have a way to find out if there's ever been a cluster subdivision approved and developed?
As far as I'm aware, there has not ever been.
Because they would have had to obtain a very long septic permit. And they had not approved anything like that in the county.
Doesn't necessarily have to, it can be done on individual set. It can be done the same way, just a smaller area. Or they could do a step system or something like that.
They would not approve the step system. They would not do that.
I don't want to agree.
Well, we took it out of Cheatham County's ordinance is the reason I asked, and it's in Ashland cities, and we're in the process of taking it out there. And if it doesn't give you a quality difference in your development, it doesn't need to be there, number one. But if it does need to be there, it needs to be somewhere else. It needs to be in the subdivision regulations instead of zoning ordinance.
And it needs to be in an area that's gonna have access to sewer, in my opinion. If you're gonna have some clusters, which I'm not against in the right area, but you really do need to have better sewage when you're doing multiple.
Well, the cluster itself doesn't really change the density. I mean, if you've got 100 acres and you want to develop a regular subdivision, you know how many lots you're going to get. If it's set up properly, the cluster is for those 100 acres that have a lake in the middle of it, or steep slope that takes up half of it, but you can shift that territory that you can't develop and build houses on to a smaller lot, so that you still wind up with
Same amount of houses.
75 houses, yeah.
Yeah.
On a smaller footprint. That's what a cluster is supposed to do. Whether this one tries to accomplish that or not, I don't know.
But we do not have to do it.
Okay. Okay, well then, my recommendation is to take that bad boy out.
All right. Well, like I said, if you'll put that,
Less more.
if you'll put that with a bullet point, I can bring that up to the planning, talk with Johnny Kerr, and we'll get that on the agenda.
Okay,
And you can kind of go through it that way. And then send it before the full commission, since it is an amendment to the ordinance. And just do it as an amendment to the ordinance, just to remove this section.
I would probably caution on running too far ahead of it. I would think it would have a better showing if it's done all together, if you can do that. I mean, if you start piecemealing it, you're going, I'm afraid you're going.
We've run into that already.
Yeah.
So at the same time, the whole point of piecemealing was we didn't want to send such a large document that everyone just voted against because they didn't even read it.
Yeah,
So
understand.
we're just trying to find that happy balance now of education and time to understand what we're actually bringing forward.
Still trying to learn when to say quiet. Just bear with me.
We all are.
It's a failing. I can't overcome.
All right, well, moving on, if there's no other discussion on this particular point. There is one conditional uses that I would like to for us to discuss tonight. In your agenda, you could have not a proposed ordinance. It is a section out of two counties. it's their procedure for authorizing conditional use. It actually lists, what I'm wanting to address here tonight is looking at us adopting this special conditions for locations of First Amendment protected adult-oriented entertainment businesses. We have nothing in Charlottesville County regulating adult businesses. We can regulate restaurants, we can regulate, doctor's offices, but we've got nothing regulating this. It's been this way for quite some time. Apparently, when the state did their regulations for the adult entertainment industry, it was an opt-in situation, and Charlottesville County didn't opt in. So therefore, they don't apply here. So looking through this, I'm hoping that I got it to everyone in time, that you've had a chance to read it before the meeting. Yes, there is in theirs, they list the zoning as I2 heavy industrial. The equivalent to that, if you look in the map that I sent out, would be our M1, would be our heavy industrial. And there is a fairly large property of M1s down by the river. At the end of Harold Lane. That would meet all the regulations that are in here. You'd be 1,000 foot away from a residential, a church, or it's a large property. You put it in the middle, you're 1,000 foot from everything. So,
You talk about this one, the river.
yeah,
Dr. Miller's
On the
place.
left there.
Yep.
There's a
So-
guy gonna put some apartments there. He was gonna have to put a turn lane in and then head in. But he got approval, put an apartment.
main thing is we cannot regulate any business out of existence now. It has to have a place it can go. We kind of learned that with the quarry. Not trying to overregulate anything. Whether we like it or not, it is a First Amendment protected entity. We do have to provide an area for it in our zoning somewhere in the county if we're going to regulate it at all. So for everyone who's already read through this, I will move forward for any discussion.
At the top of this map in the Hartsville, there's light purple up there. That's not M1.
That is not.
That is I1,
Yes, there is
the
no,
light purple up there.
there is no M1 in the urban district.
Okay. So the only M1 is this little section right there.
Yes, and
Okay.
then there's M2, which is power call. Is the dark.
And so the purple that's in Hartsville is, okay, I1.
Is a different.
Got it.
That's your general industrial. Why it is in the key dark purple, but on the map, a light purple.
Right, yeah.
And that's just one of those things. And I will say that the M1 that's showing here is not 100% accurate, because there are little pieces, especially on Harold Road there. You can see there are some lots there that have been rezoned and aren't reflected on this map. They were rezoned to R1s.
There's a donut over in there.
Yeah,
And
but I think that donut has actually expanded a little bit along that
yeah,
road. Yes.
Out this way, is them lots still M2?
There are a couple that never came before us for rezoning. So there are a couple of houses still out there that are still in one. I believe they're still being taxed at an A1 rate, though. I don't think that change was ever made.
Yeah.
I think we need to get something in place as soon as we can.
Agreed. I think this is great. And I think that M1,
So is that the only change that anyone sees from what we have here? Everyone okay with 1,000 feet? Kind of rule that they do. I think that's pretty much a standard. Rick, you might be able to speak to this. 1,000 foot from a church residential, that's pretty the standard.
It's- it sort of turns on what I've heard described as a reasonable person test. You know, what would a reasonable person expect? And that's pretty close to what most people would think of as being a safe separation.
So. Just a thought, so if they do apply. They have to submit a site plan. Existing land uses within 200 feet only 200 feet if we're saying they need to be 1,000 feet away from the buildings.
And then that was something that I was going to. I was going to discuss, but I saw that also, and. Yeah. If you're gonna be 1,000 foot away from everything, you don't wanna know just, you need to be used out to 1,000 feet.
It's not all.
Well, those are different. One is conditional use of a general body of the ordinance and the other is specific to the.
Okay, yeah,
That,
so there's
the 200 feet is just what's required for a general site.
So there's two different pieces here. So on the first page, you've got the procedure for authorizing conditional uses. And that's that procedure. And then on the back page, you actually have the section on adult entertainment.
Okay, so this is a general BZA, this is what you do for BZA. This is what you do for this, and does it have on here? Site plan, all right, so if they're gonna be doing this, then it would supersede this is what's in there.
And this would put it as the special condition. Not just to be accepted, so it wouldn't just automatically involve a commercial law. It would be a special exception for.
Not commercial, right,
Well, for this, yeah, we can.
it just does, looks like IT heavy industrial.
And so I've made a note on mine, and that's what I sent the planning and the, Mr. Beller, our county attorney, will have that section changed out. So instead of M1 or the I2, it'll say M1 heavy industrial. Actually, it'd be general industrial. I want to make sure the language matches the zoning there.
Good idea.
Wonder if this is why when you're going out 40 towards Cookville. Yeah, but they're only on the interstate there, nowhere, out in the middle of nowhere.
There is one on 70 in Cookville.
It's. Yeah, there's one
That might have been
also,
with
It's the
Sparkle.
same owner, like the same, it's like, there's three of them, I think.
because there's one going.
Not because I frequent these places, okay?
No, I mean, you can't drive to Cookville without seeing the signs.
Bakery items?
Anyway. Also,
There's one on 111 on the way from 40 to Livingston. I know because I covered cases at the hospital up there.
yeah, 'cause he likes-
It's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there's literally, it's just farmland as far as you can see. And it's right there off of 111. Okay. So.
But it's not in a neighborhood.
It's
It's not
not
next,
neighborhood.
not next to a school.
On,
It would actually be when they take 141 over the river, it would be as close to that road, our M1 would be, as it would be 111 to where this. Business is now.
so do you need a
So-
motion to send this on?
Yes, I would need a motion. Send this-
Make a motion to send this to the planning commission?
Yeah, so it'll go to the planning next.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
With the M1.
With the M1
M1
change,
county.
yes.
That's what I
So I've got a
said.
first, a second, all in favor?
That wouldn't squeeze a third of it.
Any opposed? That's everyone. All right, so I will make those changes and I will get this to both planning and to for his review. And so that should get this on next month's agenda for planning. And I'll keep you all posted on how this goes. All right, is there anything else that, any general discussions? These were the only two items I had on the agenda as far as planning, so.
Is there any plan to come back with the ordinances that didn't pass the commission's?
At this point in planning, we are wrapping up the commercial industrial appearance ordinance that we were working on for facades. We're also working on dumpster screening, utility screening. We're gonna do all that as one, commercial industrial package. I think that's what most of the members thought we were gonna be presenting. We originally were, that was the idea. GNRC kind of broke it down a little more than what we were hoping for. What we're actually gonna get finalized next month and have something to come before us and then go before the full commission is what I was under the impression we were gonna get 3 months ago. The lighting ordinance has been kind of postponed till we get this approved or not. No one really expected the parking lot, the ADA parkings to even be an issue. That's why we kind of sent it ahead forward. So we are trying to do this in a process that gets it accomplished for the reasons that everyone has said it needs to get done. So we have the continuity of the structures of our town. The interesting thing is separating Dollar General Market, Dollar Tree, they brought their plans to us. Not having to abide by anything that we are working on currently in planning. Lo and behold, their plans fit everything that we're saying. They're using the preferred materials, they're doing this, the 50% or 60%. They're doing metal siding down the sides, which is perfectly fine, just like Dollar General, but the facade, the road facing, part of the building completely fits everything that they're doing. Yeah,
It looks like all our other buildings.
it looks like all their other buildings. So we're not impeding business coming to Trousdale County. We're just trying to set us minimum standard. So that we don't have just a bunch of pole barns popping up and having to deal with them in 15, 20 years when they start falling apart. If we're gonna have businesses come in, it should be an honor to come do business in Trousdale County. We should quit begging people to come here. We're growing in population. The population numbers are starting to support certain businesses. And that's why we're getting a hotel. We finally have a large enough population that they say, okay, you're above 10,000 now, so you can support a hotel. Well, now we've got a hotel coming in.
Where is it?
It's gonna be on the corner of McMurray.
Wagner
and
House.
Old 25. Halltown.
Population also allowed us to have a full Dollar Tree rather than Dollar Tree / Family Dollar. So that was a good win. And going back to what David was talking about too, we're also looking at, okay, what is the best way to present all this information? That was also the discussion, rather than just verbal, especially with building materials, whether it be preferred or limited. But being able to have like examples so that people can see, all right, what does this mean, the cementitious siding versus,
The hardy board.
the
That was
hardy board.
a big one for us, trying to figure out what the difference was. And I actually had to go to Source One over off 109 and talk with them to even get a true understanding of what the difference between the two, because everyone just says cement board, and you think, okay, it's just hardy board. Well, Hardy's a brand, and there's different tiers of cement board.
Absolutely.
And there's a reason why the cementitious board, which is just a cement coating fiberboard, is different than, say, a hardy board type, where it's all the way through, the concrete's all the way through the fibers. One, once it gets wet behind that coating, it dissolves and disintegrates into mush. The other one doesn't. So it's a longer lasting material, less maintenance involved. So our idea is to try to promote as much use of the low maintenance materials so that the buildings look good for longer periods of time once they're constructed. So that you don't have,
Property maintenance complaints.
property maintenance, complaints, which are very expensive to enforce and
I'm concerned.
time consuming at that. So that was,
It's about as expensive.
it is. Time you put the installation and doing it properly, yes, it is not cheap. But there's gonna be some things like that, and it might be a simple thing if I can find cementous board, because it is so hard now, because most suppliers don't even carry it. They consider it an inferior product. Source One doesn't even carry the product. They didn't have a sample to give me.
It all went to mush.
They don't like to push. So it's that kind of thing. that I'm trying to get together so that when we bring that forward, we actually have, just a table set up and here's your samples. These are all the preferred, here's the limited, and then here's what we're saying, we don't want it in front of our buildings. And even with the preferred, you don't have to do the whole facade of your building, we're just saying 60% of the face of it has to be the preferred. And you can do limited, which is always going to be the cheaper, the rest of the way up. And you can do that on the sides and on the back and save your money there, just putting the most of, what's facing the road. Now, the thing that did come up is if you're on and you're on a corner and you've got two sides of your building that are road facing, both sides of the building qualify and have to comply. But when we look at the buildings that we already have in place, even going to the Piggly Wiggly or going to the strip mall there that Foodland's in, they're already in compliance. They're already 60%. And so if those buildings thought it was important to do this, why wouldn't we want all our new buildings coming in to do the same? So. And I know I've made that speech before here, and I'm just trying to get the wording down because I'm going to have to do it in front of the whole commission. I really want to get it right this time. Yes, sir.
Before you send this document out,
Yeah.
make sure there's agreement internally. I went back to the original to see where the conflict was. If you read down into paragraph C, it refers back to 2.1-4, and that's trying to encompass the 4 parts of what was 2.1 in the original. That doesn't belong. It should, in this nomenclature, it should be B, small I through small IV, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
And then down in the last paragraph, that one is off the mark entirely. It just says 2 parentheses, 1 parenthesis 4. It should read the same. It should be, but whatever the heading is for special conditions, whether that's Roman numeral 1 or whatever, that should be 1. I'm sorry, it should be B with small I through small IV. To include all 4 of those, where this reference did that. If you look in the original,
Yeah.
this one only talks about the last one. It shouldn't be that way.
All right, so I made the correction there. So B dot little I through little IV
Yes, same,
on C. G, and it is down on G, it's just the same thing,
same, yeah,
referencing back to what's already in the.
yes.
And since we're not changing the document and needing the wording, we're just changing the reference that they had. I don't see a reason for another motion, but if anyone believes I need to,
No,
Sorry about that.
no,
that's perfect.
thank you for pointing that out.
I tend to pay attention to things like that. My old dentist's office got to be on Main Street in Lebanon because of a comma.
Okay. Attorneys can do wonderful things.
They can, they did. It's right beside the Methodist church.
I know
Maybe I want to see this dollar.
Yeah, I'll look at it.
When did you adjourn?
For anyone watching this on video, the drawings that we have of the Dollar Tree are posted in this month's being June Planning Commission. I believe Amy posted all that with the packet. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn if there's no other business.
Second.
All right.